Hi Kaushik, how are you?
Hi Nupur, doing well, and you?
Very, very well. I'm so glad we're doing this. I think we're meeting after, I'm seeing your face after, I think, 10 years, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think the last time was in Bangalore when we had our class meetup just before I left for Switzerland 10 years ago, 10 and a half
Or
years
was
ago.
it was it once when you came back in between? You, me, and Nikita caught up once, remember?
Possibly, yeah, that's
Yeah,
true.
there's one.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
remember that one picture. I still have that picture. So good to have you with us, and you're part of one of my most precious projects, which is hoopsters.in.
Hmm.
And
A pleasure.
it is a website for children, parents, and schools. Okay, a lot of fun content. There's a lot of contests, a lot of content for them to read, and amongst that, there is one section that we call the Beautiful Mind.
Hmm.
Okay, so Beautiful Mind explores things like mental health, relationships, sexuality, those kind of subjects which are usually considered taboo,
Hmm.
and they absolutely should not be. And today I'm here with you talking to you about your journey of coming out, being being from the background that we are, very
Yes.
regular, well brought up middle class Indian family, and coming out to the world. I'm pretty sure that that's an interesting journey in itself. So,
Absolutely.
yeah. So, welcome, Kaushik. I'm glad to have you decide to talk to us.
It's a pleasure. I think it's one of the many millions of experiences that people have. I think getting into their own skin and getting at ease with their own skin, or sometimes or most often maybe not. But I think it merits being discussed simply because there might be something that I have lived that might be that might be something that somebody is living right now, and if it can provide any kind of solace or any kind of help. Um, I'm happy to be here. Of course, once again, it's one of the millions of experiences that people can have. I've been very fortunate, as I'm sure we will explore. And yeah, there are resources, and we'll probably talk about it or share at the end of the video for people who need to have more information or access to other answers to questions that have not been addressed here.
Amoga is here. I'm going to admit her in.
Hmm.
So, so guys, just to give you a background, Kaushik and me have been school friends. We're still friends, and we're all working professionals today. It is really nice to catch up. So the idea today is to, since we are very close friends. In fact, we used to work on so many projects together, from musical projects to debates to doing the valedictory speech. So we've spent a lot of time together. So what I'm trying to really understand is what his journey through school was, because you will learn sooner. Kaushik was very aware very early about his sexuality. So I really want to understand that as a friend, what are the signs I did not look at? Did I miss something, or could I have been more supportive? Different things, plus his own journey being in an Indian school back then.
Hmm.
So that is what we're trying to understand. So Kaushik, my first question to you is, you told us, my first question actually was, why did you agree to do this talk? But now, since you already told us why this is so important, you told me that at 12, at the age of 12, this is when you're probably just hitting puberty, or like we're just at the verge of discovering our own sexuality. You were already aware that you are attracted to men. Okay. So how did that come about? I mean, what were your initial thoughts? Was there somebody that you know around us, or was it like a celebrity or something? How did you realize that, oh, I'm attracted to a guy?
I mean, I think the question doesn't even pose itself simply because I mean, when you're a heterosexual person, you don't say how did you know you were attracted to women, right? You
Correct.
just are. Or how are you attracted, how as a heterosexual woman you're attracted to a man? You just are. You don't
Hmm.
have to know it, you don't have to feel it. I mean, you just realize it at some point that you're attracted to somebody else. Now that
Correct.
somebody else might be of your own gender or of another gender, and
Hmm.
that's basically it. I don't think I had a revelatory moment where I was like, oh, now I know that I'm attracted to men or what.
Hmm.
I just knew that I was attracted to men as well. It just happened. There were people that I used to see on the streets, maybe, or in other circumstances, maybe some. I mean, John Abraham was a big crush back then. Um, and Tom Hanks, yeah, sorry, Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise was also a big crush back then, and you just knew because at the age of 12, I think you start to realize what. evokes a feeling of because let's put it this way, sexuality is a taboo and we don't really address these questions. And now I realize that what I was feeling back then was a sexual attraction. Simple as that.
Yeah, as simple as that.
Just
That's right.
as exactly, just as a heterosexual person might find another person attractive, um, there's no questions behind it. It's just how it is. It's
Absolutely.
as simple as people having crushes during childhood. We don't really go and
Right.
say, why did you like a woman rather than a man? We just do. That's it. It's as simple as
Absolutely.
that.
I agree with you on that. That is why I want to bring this question, because a lot of people, um, this is one of the first questions that people ask, like, how did you know? How did you? It's just the way we are. That's just who you are. But the
Absolutely.
fact is, for a heterosexual, okay, sexual attraction is very normal. We had crushes on boys, we had
Yeah.
crushes on men. It was fine. But for you, considering that the society that we grew up in, when you realize that you're attracted to a man, there are some things that hold you back. There are some things that are harder for you to accept.
Yeah.
So take me through that. It's not for us. It is, oh my God, he's so cute. It's a blissful time. But
Sure.
I don't think. Correct me if I'm wrong. That it's exactly the same for a person who realizes that he or she is homosexual.
Right. So let me put it this way. Growing up in India is a very interesting experience because it is a society where sexuality is a taboo. You don't
Correct.
talk about any kind of sexuality, homosexuality, heterosexuality. We all know what kind of courses we had on sex education when we were 14, 15. You may be homosexual, you may be a heterosexual, you don't receive any sexual education at all. So we
Hmm.
never talk about, we talk about the reproductive system. We don't talk about sexuality. So
Right.
that's the difference. There's a big difference in that.
Correct.
And you may also look at all the films and the media that we are surrounded by. Sexuality is never shown. So, I mean, now it's different. You see people kissing on the screen. When we were growing up, when Jism came out, the first kiss, lip on lip kiss, when we were 13 was a revolution. And
Right.
so, in that sense, we never talk about sexuality. So, we only look at an emotional connection when it comes to relationships. And this is what we've seen all around us as well. We've never seen, if anybody showed any public display of affection, it was something like it was something um, that was to be looked down upon.
Right.
It was something that was perversive. They were perverts, and you never discussed it, right? So the only references that I had around me were basically heterosexual relationships, and where you didn't see a sexuality. And
Hmm.
on the same lines, I had a very good and interesting, let's say, ease of carrying on a friendly relationship or a good camaraderie with a lot of girls. Like, you know this, we've had very intimate chats, and it did not for all that mean that I had a crush on you or that we were in a relationship or what. But the point is, even though I had sexual attraction towards men, I was surrounded by women with whom I had an emotional connect. And I believe that at some point I'd meet one woman with whom I would have a very emotional connect, with whom I would be able to live my life. So I tricked myself into believing I was bisexual. And it
Hmm.
didn't matter that I was attracted to men, because at some point I would meet a woman with whom I'd be happy and with whom I'd get married and I'd have two kids.
Okay.
So I was very lucky that way because I could trick myself into believing that. A lot of people cannot.
Right.
So this is why I think even I
Hmm.
myself did not live through much of trauma when I was growing up, because I convinced myself that it did not matter. And let's be honest, there were no gay couples around when I was growing up. So I had
Of course.
zero models of anything beyond sexuality that was
Hmm.
related to two men. I could never imagine two men being in a relationship because I never
Correct.
saw it.
Correct.
I only believed possibly at some point when pornography was accessible that two men could have sex. That was the only thing.
Hmm.
They could
Hmm.
never have anything beyond sex. The only relationships I saw around me were heterosexual women. So my attraction to men was purely physical for me through all these points. But what I saw in relationships was an emotional attraction, which is what I felt with women. So I never believed I was any different.
So did uh, I like you said, we had a lot of intimate conversations. I tell you, oh Kaushik, look, I like this guy, he's so cute. And I
Yeah.
remember you telling me that I have a crush on such and such a girl, da 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 da.
Yeah,
We've had these conversations, right? So was
precisely.
that you still convincing yourself, or was it denial, or was it just you being confused, so to say?
I think I was confused and I was somehow in denial, but I see that's the thing, right? So in India, we believe that a very deep emotional connect is a relationship.
Hmm.
Sexuality comes second. First comes emotional connect, right? So the moment I felt a good emotional connect with somebody that I found, I mean, because you can be gay and you can still find women beautiful and attractive. Like there's nothing exclusive about it. Like, I
Yeah,
mean, come on, we can still talk about Sushmita Sen being Miss World today, and I fully go with it, right? So
absolutely.
my point is, I can find somebody attractive and have a very good emotional connect and confuse that for love, basically.
Hmm. Hmm.
So this is what I meant when I said I did back then when I said I had a crush on this and this person. It wasn't that I was physically attracted to the person. It was basically that I had a good emotional connect, and I found that person attractive for the what the person was. That's it. But there was no there was no chemistry in it.
Hmm. Hmm.
And as we will probably go through later, this is what led me through a few relationships that I had when I was in college as well. But we will come to that
Right.
eventually. We're still in school
Right.
now. We'll come to that later.
Still in school. So I also remember, like you said, sexuality is such a big taboo. A few of our classmates are watching, and we all remember how much trouble we got into when they came to know that these girls have a crush on certain boys. Our parents
Yeah,
were called to school. So I'm hoping that that has changed today, because kids are so much more aware of at least the fact that, I have a boyfriend, I have a girlfriend. These things seem normal in some schools.
yeah,
But the fact is that it's not just the school, but it's also the peer group that plays a big role. As
yes.
you remember very well, we were to some extent, not some extent, to a large extent, quite homophobic when we were young,
I was homophobic. Yes. So yes, put me on that list as well.
right? So we would use the term gay was used in a very derogatory manner, right? It was,
Yeah,
if you're calling somebody gay, it means something is wrong with them, or they don't fit in, or
yeah.
they are somebody that we can make fun of,
Hmm.
So that is what. So what do you, when you look back and you think about that today, what are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts that I was very homophobic and transphobic back then, possibly because I was in denial of what I was myself. But and I didn't want to accept my own attraction towards men. So it is easy to not be the victim of homophobia, but to transfer that to somebody else. And I
Right.
remember this vividly. We have, I mean, I won't take names, but we have had a classmate with whom we've had a very um, troublesome relationship when we were kids, and we've bullied him all through our high school years. And I'm happy that this person was more resilient than what we give them credit for, because other people in the same state would have been traumatized. And full credit to this person to coming out unscathed from all this and really developing their own personality. But I remember ridiculing this person and participating actively in homophobic and transphobic slurs against this person simply because it made me less of a victim and I didn't have to worry about me being targeted.
Correct. Correct.
And now it is so clear to me how transphobic and homophobic I was back then. And
Yes.
I've had discussions about this with this person in question. And thankfully, we still share a very healthy relationship and we accept that we were all idiots at some point. And we can
Right.
move on and learn from our mistakes. And that's basically the point of the discussion as well. We've all been homophobic and transphobic at some point. That's not, I mean, we can't change history. What we can change is the present and the future. The point is to understand where we went wrong and then move on from it.
Kaushik, what were your earliest references of a gay couple or a gay relationship? Were they positive, or were they altogether negative?
I didn't have any representation of a gay couple. None, zero. The only reference that I had to homosexuality was the earliest representation that I had of homosexuality was when we were in class 9. And I remember this very vividly. There was a question, there was a whole chapter on diseases and basically all different sources of diseases. And we had a small paragraph on sexually transmitted diseases where HIV was being discussed, and the only reference there was that HIV was prevalent among men who had sex with men. This was through my entire schooling and through the entire syllabus. the only reference of homosexuality. So my earliest understanding of homosexuality comes with the stigma of saying, if I'm going to be gay, I'm going to have AIDS. I may as well not be gay and then live a bisexual life or live a life with a woman. So to what extent it suffocates you into not accepting who you are, education plays a big role. And this is why I think it's interesting that schools should have access to videos like discussions like what we are having now, because that is what will help
Right.
them understand what we went through and the kind of baggage that we had growing up with this kind of an education, and why it
Hmm.
was so troublesome for us to accept who we were. Because we came with a baggage of stigma that you didn't want on yourself. You didn't want to be associated with the population that was suffering from a disease that was a killer back then,
Right.
right?
Right.
The earliest exposure that I had to a gay couple was a decade later, nearly, when I was in Switzerland. I didn't have any exposure to any gay relationships, emotional relationships, couples, none when I was growing up. And I think this is what made it difficult, as or difficult or easy, I don't know, but it's what made me believe that what I had was simple sexual attraction and no emotional preferences at all. I believed that since I was emotionally attached to women, I could live a life with a woman. I didn't even think about men, because I believe I never saw men in relationships.
I think you're right. I think for a lot of young uh, young men and women who are coming into their sexuality, especially when it comes to homosexuality, the today luckily we have a lot of sitcoms that are making it a very normal thing for a gay couple to be in love, to have a family. But back then,
Hmm.
like you said, the only references were probably porn,
Yeah,
and the only references were these very shallow, terrible representations of them in our films.
yeah,
Those were the so probably the whole atmosphere played to our homophobia. It made us,
absolutely. And
you
I
know
think you can add to it the fact that the only people that you believed were attracted to other men, because we have a way of not discussing sexual orientation and sexuality to an extent where we can confuse homosexuality with transgender people. The only representations of any sexual minorities that we had around us were the hijras.
correct,
And
correct.
the way we stigmatize, even today, the way we stigmatize these transgender communities
Yeah.
speaks a lot about how we treat any minorities. And you didn't want to be associated with any of that stigma. So you would rather deny your own pleasure instead of having to live a life of victimization, right?
So true. That is true. That I completely agree with you. So
Hmm.
when you are talking about denying yourself any pleasure or being in a place where it's hard to accept what you're feeling, whether it's a sexual attraction towards a man or whatever, I would think, Kaushik, that this journey must have been very lonely, right? Because you're not able to actually talk about this to somebody. Did you ever feel that?
It was very, let's put it this way. I mean, look, I've always been surrounded by a lot of very close friends. And fortunately for me, sexuality was not a big issue in the sense that I never felt the need to explore my sexuality when I was 18, 19, 20, 21. It really wasn't a big deal. I was really happy with, because I went to IIT. I was really happy with the friends that I had in IIT. I was very happy with the people who were around me. I've had a very, very supportive family who've been with me through everything, right from when I was a kid and at school, um, through my whole journey of exploration and understanding of myself. My family has been with me. So I never gave it um, too much space, to be honest. But sorry, I think I forgot your question. I went into a tangent and I forgot your
That's
question.
okay. My question is, did
Um,
you ever feel lonely? Did you ever feel
yeah,
lonely with
right.
these
So
thoughts?
yeah, I think that's a very interesting question because so as I don't know, maybe we'll get to it already. When I was in IIT, since we're discussing it, I had a few relationships with girls. Because simply because, like I mentioned, I felt a very good emotional connect with them,
Hmm.
and I confused a deep camaraderie
Hmm.
for love, which
Hmm.
is not the case as we know all today.
Hmm.
It's not what love is. There needs to be a minimum of physical attraction and a minimum of chemistry for love to happen. Otherwise, it's a very, very close friendship, but it's not love.
Hmm.
And I never felt very lonely because between my friends and the few flings that I had, um, I was well covered. The moment I felt lonely was when I started exploring my sexuality, because on one side I knew that my with time, my attraction was more oriented towards men,
Mm-hmm.
but my emotional side was still oriented towards women. I was like, na ghar ka, na ghat ka, neither here nor there. I was like, what is happening with me? I don't understand why I feel more of an emotional connect with women and a more of a physical attraction towards men. And I was like, what am I going to be later in life? Because I know that I'm not going to be able to live the life of a wife and two kids as I had dreamt before, because I clearly see no physical attraction. On the other side, with men, I've had physical attraction, but I've never seen a gay couple. So that was a
Right.
very lonely period back then. That 1.5 years when I was still exploring my sexuality was a very lonely period. But eventually you get, I mean, I was lucky enough to get through it. And yeah, it was, and I guess we will come back to this again, but maybe I'm
Yeah.
jumping
No, no. I think you're
edges, but
perfectly in line.
yeah, that's when I met my husband, who himself was very, very open about his own sexuality and sexual orientation, and that helped me get into my own skin, because it
Right.
was inspiring to finally see somebody who accepted themselves for who they were.
So, tell me one thing. Did this period where you were, of course, you had your confusions. You were like, I'm attracted to women emotionally, men physically. There's a lot of confusion. Did it have any prominent effects on your overall personality? Were there any marked changes?
Absolutely. I think so. This is what is interesting, because there's a whole term for this, because we call it coming in. So we talk about coming out. Coming out is basically when you come out to society
Right.
as your own self.
Right.
Coming in is when you come into yourself as your own self. It's basically accepting yourself for who you are. So that's what coming in is. So a coming out is always preceded by a coming in. And I think this period of loneliness was actually the moment when I was coming into myself, because I was asking questions. I was asking myself questions that I never asked myself before.
Hmm.
What did I really want? What did I really like? Irrespective of what society tells me what to like, irrespective of what I see around me, what do I, as Kaushik, like? What am I attracted to?
Correct.
What do I want in life? And that is where I started getting more at ease with myself. I've had also, I mean, not probably as much as big people, but I've had my fair share of body issues as well. So it was also a period when I started accepting my own body for what it was. I started understanding what suited me in terms of dressing. So it's very interesting, because it's a very interesting turnaround phase. The moment I started accepting and understanding myself better is when I felt more and more at ease with my own self.
Right. This is something we spoke about, right? Because I don't remember Kaushik being ever worried about what he's wearing.
Yeah.
The Kaushik I remember was white shirt, some trousers, some chappal. It's just that. That's. I don't think you ever bothered. But today I see you making an effort, looking good. You know, it
Yeah.
shows that acceptance is so important in so many ways. It's not just about sexuality, right? It changes you as a
Yeah.
person.
Absolutely. And I think this is something that is very universal. Any person who is targeted for who they are, whether it be people who are big, or whether it be um, people who are different, whether it be because of their body shape, body size, sexual orientation, the way of thinking, way of dressing,
Right.
their aesthetics, whatever they're persecuted for, it takes a lot of effort to get into your own self. But the moment you do, it changes everything.
So once you accepted, okay. Well, before we come to that, let me ask you, when did you? Now let's come to the question: when did you finally accept? You know what? I'm physically attracted to men, and I can possibly even have an emotional connect with them.
This took a lot of trial and error, to be honest. So I moved to Switzerland in 2010 in order to pursue my PhD.
Hmm.
And it was very interesting, because in India there were moments when I was like, okay, should I meet men? Maybe should I maybe meet other? There were gay portals back then where you could meet and date men, all underground, because it was still criminalized back then,
Right.
and there was a big social stigma. So there was a but I was also afraid of what I might find there. I was afraid of finding myself being homosexual, which is a big fear,
Hmm.
and confirming my own orientations as much as they are natural to me. But coming to Switzerland was interesting, because nobody knew me there. Nobody could realize that Kaushik is gay. Only Kaushik could understand that Kaushik is gay. So, in that sense, it provided a space of anonymity. I was nobody there in a certain sense. And
Right.
even if I was discovered, it didn't really matter because I could easily hide it from people back in India.
Hmm.
And that anonymity is what provided me a sense of security to try and explore a little bit. So that's when I started dating men. That's when I started understanding what I wanted, what I didn't. At some points, I had a maybe a fling where there was, even with men, it happens sometimes that you had a very good emotional connect, but no sexual attractions. So that this is basically the still the same coming in period when I was like, I don't know what I want. I don't know what I like. I'm interested in women emotionally, but physically there is zero attraction. There are men with whom I've had a physical attraction, but no emotional attraction. Men with whom I've had emotional attraction but no physical attraction. What am I going through? What do I want?
Right.
And that's when I slowly started to try and understand what I was looking for. First thing I did was put my bisexuality out of the way and then start to slowly accept that I'm only attracted to men physically, which meant that any relationship that I would have was going to be with a man. And slowly that helped me progress little by little into accepting other things about my own self.
So if I were a young man like yourself, maybe
Mm-hmm.
India, maybe abroad, how do I safely explore my sexuality? Why I'm asking you this is, for a heterosexual person to meet somebody is easier.
Mm-hmm.
It's much easier. So if I am somebody who is younger, want to explore my sexuality, what
Mm-hmm.
avenues are there for me to find a partner, find and understand what I'm going through?
Yeah. So I think this is a very, very important question. And I believe this is not just for uh, homosexuals. I believe this is a question that is very, very broad, and it goes on to all kinds of sexualities, all kinds of sexual orientation, simply because we still do not have a proper sexual education in our schools. So the only reference for any sexual activity for adolescents is still porn.
Correct.
We still don't understand how to put on a condom unless we ourselves go and look for it. And trust me, very few people go and look for it.
Hmm. Hmm.
So things like this are still not taught, and these are primordial. How do you expect people to control population if people don't even know how to properly use preservative, um, yeah, birth control
Protective
devices,
measures, yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
and I think this is why we need to first start talking about it. And only once these basics are covered can we actually ensure that somebody can safely explore their own sexuality. Because unless you understand what you're getting yourself into to the basics, it's very difficult. And I think
Right.
not understanding this can lead to unpleasant sexual encounters or experiences, which can only dissuade you further from accepting who you are. If you're traumatized, you don't want to accept what traumatized you, right?
Correct.
So if you've had and this is what also is a problem when it comes down to things like pedophilia or abuse, because a lot of young adolescents go around to explore their sexuality. Generally, maybe there are older men around, and if this has happened, and you have a lot of abuse issues that are happening around. All these cannot be addressed unless you promote safe sex, unless you promote a place where people can talk about their sexuality, because that's how you ensure that these young men and young women and young people are not going through the wrong sources to understand their sexuality.
Right. Right.
And I think that is very important. Once that happens, I think then you have your own plethora. There are, and I think fortunately, at least for us homosexuals, there are portals. um, I think there's a Facebook page called Good on You, which very openly talks about sexuality, and you can anonymously post questions, and there are forums where you can discuss this. So to answer your question in very brief, I think a lot of basic sex education is missing.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
also, in the meantime, because we cannot wait forever, use forums to try and understand what other people are going through. There are lots of, thankfully today, internet is a boon in this sense because it makes things visible. There are lots of forums where you can go ask questions, wait for answers from professionals who will help you through this. Do that before you do any exploration, which might result in trauma.
Absolutely. And if somebody is still trying to accept their sexuality and they have a traumatic event, I think that would have a far more impact on their mind. Like if I
Absolutely.
they're already in the middle of processing who they are,
Yeah.
and then they go through something traumatic. So you're absolutely right. Schools, parents should talk to children about sex,
Yeah.
sexuality. And there is,
Absolutely.
I do not believe that there is an age for this. It is just when
Mhm.
your child is ready. And I think you can make
Absolutely.
out. You can make
I
out.
think you can make it out. And I think we can nonetheless set a minimum age at which you can provide sexual education, right?
Right.
So, I mean, look, we are in a country where the age of consentment, if I'm not wrong, India is still at 16. So it's not 18, if I'm not wrong. Correct. Anybody can correct me. I'm fine with it. But even then, think about it. Maybe, and especially now with people having smartphones all over the place, the first moment when you can start to see porn is probably what, 11 or 12?
Yeah.
Because anybody has access now. You can
Yeah.
lie saying you're 18 and get in anytime, right?
Yeah.
From the age of 12 to the ideal age of consentment, 18, imagine 6 years of watching pornography to understand sexuality. That's a huge baggage to undo afterwards.
True.
That's a
Absolutely.
huge, yeah. And let's not forget, pornography is heavily misogynistic. It is not at all oriented towards women's pleasure. Women's pleasure is a taboo, even today, even in the Western world.
Correct.
So these things need to be undone before we get into these huge baggages that we are all getting through.
Yeah, and it has a lot of ripple effects. It's not just about sexuality. It's about people not. It's not about homosexuality or heterosexuality. It's about people not being able to retain marriages, people not being happy
Yeah.
in marriages or in a relationship, and then going to, and in worst case scenarios, abuse.
Yeah.
And I think one of the biggest causal factors for any sexual abuse that we see today is lack of understanding and this very warped sense of sex. Like you said,
Hmm.
such a long time for us to learn about sex through porn, right?
Absolutely.
Even for me, my first ever understanding of sex came from my friends.
Yeah.
I think you guys, right?
Yeah.
You were my
Absolutely.
first
Yeah.
point of reference is like when the girls used to talk or when I had you to speak to. So I never really spoke to any other guy about sex, but we would discuss about these things.
Sure. And that's the weird part, right? So my only references to sex was porn. So you might have discussed it with me, but I'm not any better educated than you are, right? At the end of the
Exactly.
day.
Exactly.
And this is the problem right now. We don't address these questions in a very structured way, in an educative way. And this needs to be addressed because otherwise you're only going to continue to have, I mean, we rape culture is prevalent. And one of the big
Yeah.
parts of this is missing sexual education.
True. So, Kaushik, you came out to me. I remember we were looking at our chats. 2012 is when you
Hmm.
came out to me and said, listen, and this is when I was asking you about your then girlfriend, saying, how's your thing going? And you said, no, it didn't work out. You know why? And you said, oh, because I'm gay. And I remember this, when you're still not told your parents back then. Hmm?
Yeah.
So, who was we don't have to take names, but when was the first time you confessed to somebody or came out to somebody and said, listen, I'm definitely gay? And what was their reaction?
So I think so. This is interesting because for me, coming out happened in two phases. Because I first came out to somebody as bisexual. This was one of my
Hmm.
close friends back in Switzerland. Another person was doing their PhD thesis, and this was just after I had my first boyfriend. Because it was the first time I said, okay, look, physically there's some attraction, emotionally there's some connect, and I already felt this need to share my friends with them, and then try and make a small coming out. So I came out to one of my closest friends as bisexual, and there was no reaction in the sense that it was something very normal for them, which is quite nice because you were like, I did all this build up in my mind, and it actually was not required.
Oh
And then
my
there was a second
God.
coming out about me completely removing women from my set of sexual attraction lists. And this happened with my husband, actually. So, like I mentioned, this was probably 2 months after we just met. And it was only then, after being with him, that I could actually openly accept myself for who I was because I saw how comfortable he was in his own skin and I wanted that. And I knew that the only way to do it was through my own acceptance. And I remember this very evening when I told him, I think you're the first person I'm going to tell this to. Um, but now I think I can openly accept that I'm gay. And it was met with a lot of love and a lot of support and a lot of encouragement because it was only going to nourish the relationship further. Me being myself and openly myself is only going to nourish a relationship rather than me pretending to be somebody else and living a lie, most part.
Right. And these were your Swiss counterparts, your friends. What about
Mhm.
the Indian friends and Indian counterparts? What were their reactions like? Were they equally supportive, or was there some, oh my God, what are you saying?
This is very interesting. So I'm going to be a little bit embarrassed because I don't really know who the first person in India was, but it happened in a very short period of time. I think it was April 2012 when I came out to a lot of people. I mean, every second day I was coming out to somebody, literally, really no exaggerations. And I remember sending out emails to classmates, sending out emails to my classmates from IIT. Um, and I think every single person reacted to it with a lot of support and warmth. I'm very thankful for that. I'm very lucky. I'm extremely lucky that I
Hmm.
had almost zero traumatisms from coming out at all.
Hmm.
I didn't have any problems with it at all. It was actually quite supportive. The only little hiccup that I had was when so this was in April, and then later on in June or July, I'd made the decision that I wanted to come out to my parents later that year, and that's when I was trying to understand how to get into the topic, how to introduce it, and how should I go through, whom should I have cohorts in my side, should I tell some cousins before so that I have some support, and so on. And I remember coming out to one of my cousins,
Hmm.
and it's, for some people it really is a shock, especially people who you're close to. It can come as a shock, and that's fine. There's nothing
Hmm.
wrong with the shock. People are shocked all the time.
Hmm.
But what I remember vividly from this discussion was she said, look, and this is very Indian. This is very Indian, where where we put a lot of melodrama into everything. So she was like, look, your parents are getting old. They don't need this burden on them. Are you sure you want to tell this to your parents, because they might be fragile and you might cause some health problems in them and everything, which is very weird because she herself had broken a lot of taboos in the family, and I trusted in her to, because she married out of the caste and everything. So I trusted in her to give me some kind of light, and I was a little disappointed, I'll be honest, by the lack of support that I got. But then again, I questioned myself and I said, look, she's a cousin. All due respect for her age and her experiences, but I think I know my parents better. And if I believe that my parents will come around to it, I think I have more reason to believe that than what she says. And that's eventually what happened.
So did this conversation with your cousin put you in any place of doubt or a slightly dark place, saying, "What if my parents don't accept?"
It did. I mean, look, you always have to confront these questions at some point. And the point is there, where do you place your confidence? I think if you people, in general, I've always believed that the lesser you make an issue out of it, the lesser others will make an issue out of it. If I'm going to say, look, I have a news, you might be shocked and you might be disappointed, but take it slowly and everything, you are not helping them at all. Um, Again, to each their opinion. This is my belief, and this is my belief because I've dealt with it afterwards. I had my doubts about what my parents would come around to, but at the end of the day, after a couple of weeks, I was like, look, I know my parents well enough. I told them when I stopped wearing my sacred thread and everything, and they eventually came around to accepting it. They asked their questions. They were very curious about why I decided to make these moves and everything, not practice religion actively and so on. They were curious to understand why, but at a certain point, they were like, "Look, you're being a good person. You're living your life. I think that's what's most important."
Right.
And this kind of little feedback is what helped me create this confidence in my parents to say, look, they might take their time, but I know they'll come around to it.
Hmm. So explain. Give me like a visual picture of the day you came out to parent. What was the setting? Amma, Appa, sit down. Give me a cup of
So
coffee.
this is very interesting, and I think one of the more or less passive witnesses to this scene is my sister, who's also in the call right now.
We're gonna get
Maybe she can join in later. But interestingly, before I told my parents, I told my sister the previous evening.
right.
Um, and this was very interesting because she had such a neutral reaction. I was almost disappointed by the lack of drama back then. I remember she was more surprised because I'd already met my now husband, back then boyfriend, and I said, "Look, I'm in a relationship. I have a boyfriend." And her response was, "I thought you were such a nerd. You were never going to be in a relationship. I'm only surprised about you being in a relationship than about you being gay." It was for her no deal at all, no big deal at all, like zero drama. And I was just a little bit disappointed with the lack of drama. And the next day, so she was off to college. She had gone to college, and we were. She had plans to move to another city and start working, and be independent. And I fully supported her in this move because I believe everybody should try it. Everybody should, because that's the most learning that you can have in your life, living by yourself. And we had this discussion with my parents. So I had planned it out a little bit. I played it. I was like, look. I'm unfortunately going to use my sister as a peon, but well. So we were discussing. Kavya wants to go to live in Madras and do her studies and so on. I think it's very important. I think when you live by yourself, there's a lot of things that you understand about your own self, which are very important and crucial to your growing up. And speaking of which, now that I've been living for a year and a half in Switzerland, well, there's something that I've realized about myself, and I think I want to share it with you. It's basically that I'm gay. So, rip the band-aid off. That was it. Appa was sitting there. Amma was sitting on the other side. Appa was like, I knew it. I'm like, well,
Wow.
fine, but let me have my moment. I'm telling you something.
Like your family didn't give you any drama, man. They were like, yeah,
Well, no,
okay.
there was drama. There's always drama. There was drama.
Huh.
No, but I mean, it was very positive drama. And it was a very, very, very interesting discussion because my parents went at it from a very curious point of view. And honestly, kudos to them because they really went about asking questions because they didn't understand fully what it
Correct.
was.
Correct.
And it's very easy when you don't understand something and when you're afraid of something to hold back to stereotypes and not ask questions.
Correct.
My
Correct.
parents went the exact opposite direction. They were like, so what happens when you have sexual attractions, and have you had sex, have you not had sex, how do you know this, has porn never helped, and like very, very open discussions. Very surprising to their own credit. And I remember this being like my first sexual education in a certain sense, but in the opposite sense, because I was teaching somebody what it was.
Right.
And at the end of the day, they would I'd done my months of research before. I was like, I'm going to read up on homosexuality in India, sexual minorities in India, so that I have my answers to any questions they might have and everything. And my mother just stopped me halfway through the explanation saying, you don't have to explain all this to us. We understand. We've seen it in the newspapers. We know it exists. We know it's natural. There's nothing to worry about. As long as you are happy, that's what we want. We don't want you to be alone and depressed because, we come back to the same thing. There was no representation of gay couples. So my parents were like, whom are you going to be with when you're old?
Correct.
That was their worry. Their worry was not that I was attracted to men. And that was their worry. And they were only worried that I would be depressed and I would be all alone and all that. And when I consoled them saying, look, I have a very close set of friends and very open set of friends, and they've been fully supportive. You don't have to worry about me being lonely because I'm not. And this is I think what helped me to also place more confidence in them. And since then, my relationship with my parents has just been excellent. I mean, we've gone through so much more since then. I can be so much more transparent since then because I'm not hiding anything from them anymore.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Kaushik, I think if there's anybody here who's watching, I don't know, today or maybe in the future, they're watching and their children come out to them, I think this approach is almost ideal. Sometimes parents may be educated, like if it was my family, my father is very educated about the subject, being a filmmaker. So I would
Mm-hmm.
expect him to be instantly accepting because he already has information,
Yeah.
you know. But when parents really uh, deny or they disagree from a point of ignorance, I think that is really sad for the child or the person who's coming out to them.
Mm-hmm.
So, if any parents are watching this, if you do not know about homosexuality when your child comes out to you, try to ask him or her questions. Or if you think that you still cannot ask questions, try to learn about it.
Yeah.
It has
And also, I
nothing to
think, I
do
mean,
with.
just to add to this, I think it's fully okay to be shocked. It's fully okay to not know. We
Yeah,
don't all know everything. I
correct,
didn't know about myself till I was 21.
correct,
So there's nothing wrong in not knowing. Not knowing
absolutely,
is not a crime. It's
correct,
when you don't do anything about not knowing is when it becomes a problem. So
absolutely.
I would only suggest for people to try and understand what they're going through so that you understand. I mean, we all have our own troubles. We've all come up, try and relate to the troubles of the other person. The person who's coming out is spending a lot of energy and a lot of their own emotional energy in putting out something that's very precious to them. So that needs respect.
True, true.
Yeah. So
I
I
mean,
think, yeah,
in a lot of families, even for somebody to come out saying, I have a boyfriend, like a heterosexual person to come out and say, Ma, I have a
exactly.
boyfriend, or
Yeah.
even that is hard. So
Yeah.
I can imagine for somebody who's trying to come out and say, at least my parents should understand. Let the
Yeah.
whole world not understand. At least your parents should understand for that feeling of security. So if any of you
Absolutely.
watching here has a child who has come out to you, please try to learn. Please try to learn. It has nothing to do with them being a bad person or them having bad friends or them having the wrong peer group or you making any mistake in their upbringing. It's nothing to do with that. It is
It is
just
not,
who they are.
absolutely, and I think this is very important because I know a lot of people who've gone through with their parents a very Freudian kind of analysis. What did I do wrong in the way I brought up my child that he's become or she's become that way or they have
Correct.
become that way?
Correct.
They don't become that way; they are that way.
Yes.
You didn't do anything; they are that way. We don't know exactly why because science still doesn't fully understand why this exists because we know it, but we know it exists. So there's it is not blame, it is not an accusation when somebody comes out. So and it is less about your own self than more about the person who's coming out. So give them the space when they're coming out and try and understand why.
So now that we're at the family, I'm going to pull your sister in.
Do it.
I'm going to ask her to unmute and I'm going to ask her to start her video. Kavya, can you please turn your video on, turn your audio on because you're very. I can't.
Hi.
Hi, I still can't see you. Put your video on.
Can I'm in the worst ever manner to present myself on a video. So.
Achha, okay, no problem, no problem.
No pressure.
No pressures, man, no pressure. But I'm going to ask you some questions because a lot of times the
Sure
family
stuff.
is unaccepting.
Hi, Kaushik.
Hi,
Hi,
Kaushik.
Gavi.
So a lot of times the family is really unaccepting, not because of themselves, but because of how they're going to answer people around them. What will the relatives say? What will my friends say? What will somebody else say? So did those thoughts ever cross your mind? So if I have to go out and tell somebody that my brother is gay, was it something that was hard for you, or was it just I don't really care about it? Hello, Kavya, are you there?
Frankly, I really didn't care.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You're not very audible.
Yeah. So when I actually started telling a lot of friends, one sec. Am I audible now?
Yeah,
Much better.
better.
Yeah. So when I came out to a lot of friends of mine, I really didn't care. Obviously, I asked Kaushik first if it's okay for me to tell out a lot of close friends that I had back then. I really didn't care because I still carried the image of myself being a rowdy from the childhood. If anybody talks anything bad about my brother, they're dead. So I really didn't care till one point of time, till it was people who were really close to me. After that, let's say when I was going out on a couple of dates and when I had to tell out to a couple of guys who I thought I would like or might go in a little further in relationship, when I had to tell them out, I did have thoughts because that time I was not just pulling about Kaushik. I had to pull in thoughts of what my families will be thinking when they later get to know about this, or what the guy might think. In that time, I really can't take an action. But again, the first thing that crossed me was if he's happy, why should I even decide, or why should I even think bad about it? He's
Hmm.
happy, he's settled. I don't think anybody else should have any objection with that.
Have you had any negative reactions when you spoke to people, especially when you went on a date or when you were meeting someone? Were there any negative reactions to this, saying, "Oh, okay, for this reason, I will not go out with you"?
Um, I won't say the men here openly tell out after getting to know that my brother is gay, that is the reason they don't want to go around with me. But I felt it. I mean, I know for a certain number of times that's the reason, because till then it was going on fine. And after me talking it out, if they're not going out, it kind of feels weird.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, they have their own doubts. They have a lot of stupid doubts.
Hmm.
Luckily, I've had some dates which were really nice, where they were really supportive. They have actually been very proud of Kaushik, even though they don't know him. But
Right.
yeah, negative. I have got a couple of them where the first reaction is, "Oh, really? Your brother is gay? How did he know? Are you sure? Is I
Hmm.
mean, are you? Do you really know what you're talking about?" And
Right.
I think when such guys who have seen so many things around them, and like you guys were talking about this earlier, all this information has come out open these days through, let's say, movies or comics or series, a lot of ways. And still you don't know about it and you're not ready to accept. I don't really think I have to waste my energy giving them answers.
So
You
in a
can
way, it
thank
also
me later, Kavya, for helping
helping you
you
filter
choose men more
filter
easily.
out.
No, thank you. You will still be, I will still be hating you for it, because your life is settled and my life isn't. Thank you so
Ah, there
much.
you go. Thanks, Kavya. Thank you so much. This is something that I really want to talk. Now we'll get to my
No
question.
problem.
Thanks, Kavya. I hope to see you soon, Lee.
Yes.
So, Kaushik, does this sort of um, make you feel bad that because of
No, I don't think so. I mean, because look, what are the chances that this person is going to be super open with my own sister later on? If my sister wants to wear the kind of clothes that she wants to wear and the person has an objection, they're not going to give her much more space than what they did for me being gay. I mean, it shows a certain kind of close-mindedness, unfortunately, which is just not good for my sister either. So, like I said, I mean, I guess my sister also sees it that way, and I'm pretty sure she's already told me this once or twice. It's a good test. It's a good litmus test to see who the right person might or might not be. So, I mean, yeah. So, I mean, I'm not saying that the people who accept homosexuals are all saints and have no more restrictions in their life, but I mean, there's a smaller chance.
yeah, but they're more open than the others. So
Exactly.
the
There's a
reason
higher
I,
chance of them being
the
more
reason
open.
I asked this question, Kaushik, is because a lot of people who come out and then they see their family getting even the slightest backlash, they go through a lot of guilt.
Yeah.
So the only thing that I would like to drive home here is that you don't have to feel guilty, right? You don't
I
really have
mean,
to take on the burden of guilt.
true. I mean,
Or how
I
does that
think
work?
this is important, but this is really relative because it really depends on the family backgrounds, right?
Correct.
Um, I have been lucky enough for my family to be accepting. There are lots of families that disown their children even today.
Hmm.
So I'm not saying that coming out is a universal solution simply because we don't live in ideal times. Just don't.
Hmm. Hmm.
So everybody has their right to understand and analyze the situation that they grow up in or they live in before they decide to come out or not. And it's fully respectable to not come out at some point because you feel that your own life might be in danger. Think about people in countries where the death penalty is still on
Right.
for
Right.
homosexuals,
Right.
right? So I mean, we don't have a death penalty, but let's not forget that we decriminalized homosexuality just a couple of
Very
years back,
recently. Yeah. Yeah.
right? So we still have a lot of work to do, and I fully respect people if they don't want to come out for fear of their own survival, because survival is important. What
Hmm.
if you are poor and you're losing your only source of income? I know people who are homosexuals who've been fired from their job because they came out, and this is heartbreaking because they are sometimes the only breadwinners in their family. So we have to respect some people don't want to talk about it. It's very
Absolutely.
okay. You have to
Absolutely.
give them their space. That's what they need.
Absolutely.
And this whole question of guiltiness, especially for my other for the other queer people who might be watching this, really, you shouldn't come out of pressure. You should come out of your own requirement to come out. Wait for the moment for you to come in, like I said, to feel at ease with yourself, and only then, once you feel that you can, you should. Don't force yourself into doing anything that you don't feel like doing. It really is not.
Absolutely.
I mean, you have to take care of yourself before you do anything else, right? So yeah, it's fully
True.
understandable if people don't want to come out.
Absolutely. But were you also somewhere prepared for some amount of uh, negativity towards you or your family?
You have to be.
Were you ever prepared for it, or did
You
you?
have to be. But I think my parents played a very big role, very very big role in the way I looked at things. Because look, I didn't come out to anybody else in my family when I came out to my parents, simply because I don't live in India anymore. I don't bear the consequences of any coming out. I will be done and I will be out a month later, and I'm not coming back for a year. So I don't face any backlash. My parents do. So I let my parents the complete freedom to decide whom they wanted to tell and whom they didn't. And they tested the grounds, tested the reactions of people with certain things, and then decided how they wanted to go about it. And that's fully respectable. And they've had some small negative backlashes, but my mother still says, at the end of the day, if somebody wants to disown me because they don't accept you for who they are, that's their problem. For me, you are more
Right.
important than the other people's impressions. And that's because my parents are also very strong and able and independent. I can imagine that there are families where they cannot say this because they're dependent on other people of the family. And I understand that in that
Right.
case, it's difficult to talk about it. So everybody has their own set of circumstances and environments to work in, and that needs to be respected.
Correct.
The point is to work with respect.
Absolutely. Correct. The end thing that we spoke just in the beginning also was to respect other people, respect the person who's made the choice to be gay, straight, whatever. You know, I think that it all boils down to how much respect you can give a person or receive from a person. If a person is being
Precisely.
blatantly disrespectful for these kind of reasons, I think
Yeah.
I think you respect the situation as well. Like you said, some people may be living in joint families where they really cannot get out just because of their
Hmm.
revelations. There are those.
Yeah.
Kaushik, you have been in in a part of the LGBTQ community for quite some time now. Um,
Yes.
are there any sort of scary stories that you can share with me? That these are the things that do happen to gay people.
I mean, there's a question of police extortion that would happen, but now that it's decriminalized, there's smaller chances, but you can still be faced by police extortion. That is one big issue. To sexual predators all over the place, all over the place. Sexual predators are all over the place, so be careful. Um, and yeah, I think remember to speak to people when you can have a lot of trauma from all these issues, and it's important to reach out to professionals who can help you through these questions of trauma. That is very important.
Have you
But
ever
in
had
terms of,
any instances?
I've known people who've been disowned by their families. I know people, like I said, who've lost their jobs. So I mean, all these are traumatizing situations simply based on the sexual orientation of the person. And I think this is example enough to still say we've got a long way to go before we get rid of any inequalities in the society.
And have you and your husband ever faced any sort of instances of extreme homophobia?
Yes, two particular instances, in fact, actually, of violence. Well, it's mild violence, not very, I mean, nothing to be traumatized about. But one of them was when they were young people who threw snowballs at us because we were holding hands on the street. And another point, we were almost spat at on a street where there were no passing people because we were holding hands as well. So these kind of things are traumatizing because you're being targeted for who you are. But this is more active homophobia. There's also very latent homophobia when people won't recognize your relationship. I remember one of my superiors in my previous company, because by then I was married to my husband, and he would not stop correcting me when I said my husband. He would correct me to say, "You mean your wife?" and I had to correct him 3-4 times before the information would register. And this is hurting, because this means he is
Not accepting.
erasing a part of your identity for his own convenience.
Right.
And
right.
that is also homophobia.
Right.
So there are various degrees of homophobia, violent and non-violent, and you are exposed to it. You have to be stronger than it, and that's where resources help.
So what have you done for yourself to hold on to your identity through the, see, being spit on is really traumatizing. It may not have traumatized you because you probably have a very strong sense of self, but what did you do to get there?
To get to being a strong self.
Yeah, to being a strong self, to actually hold on to your identity despite these negative instances.
I think this is something that is very interesting, because this goes back to a lot of support from when I was growing up, and also when I came out. I mean, all my friends that I've had who've reacted positively to my coming out to them, and my family, have contributed to the sense of self. This is why it's important to accept. The more you accept, the more you realize that one person who spat was wrong, not you. And that's what causes guilt.
Right.
That's what removes guilt. And this is very important. This is why support groups are very important. Before I came out, I was surrounded by people, friends, other queer people in Switzerland, who have supported me through this entire coming into myself process. And all this is super crucial, because this is what decides how you deal with yourself being gay. If you don't deal with it well, it is going to be very difficult to react against other violences from other people.
Right. And what do you think are, besides the fact that they don't get to live their romantic life, so to say, what are the other repercussions of parents snubbing somebody who's coming out, or trying to suppress them, or telling them, no, you cannot be this? What does it do to a person?
I mean, it's in itself, it's very, it's almost funny how ridiculous that statement is, right? So you cannot be, it's like saying, you cannot have black hair. Like somebody said, telling me I cannot have black hair. Like, I have black hair, that's it. What are you going to change? You can make me dye my hair, but it's not who I am. It's the black is going to show at some point. It's the same thing. It's just who I am. It's just who they are. And you have to go around to accept it. And at some point, when things get too poisonous, people from the queer community have had to break ties. This is all over history. When people have had to break ties with people who are just too poisonous for their own selves. You don't have to live in that negativity.
Right, and I don't think it's just limited to the queer community or any community. Even I know people who have broken family ties because they're not being allowed to choose the profession they want.
Sure.
So maybe somewhere parents, if you're watching, please just allow your kids to be who they are. I mean, allow them to make mistakes.
And I think in India, we have this tendency, unfortunately, to look at our children as kids all through their lives, which is fine, but also respect the fact that once they're 18, they're adults.
Right.
And if they make mistakes, let them learn from the consequences, support them through the learning. Everybody makes mistakes. Our parents are not saints. Our parents have made mistakes in their lives, right? So the point is that have your children, them be your children, but treat them as adults at a certain point. That's what lets you to have mature discussions with them. That's what lets them to have their own opinions and thoughts. And that's what helps them to decide for themselves, whether it be their profession, whether it be them affirming their own identity, whether it be sexual or gender or whatever. It's a question of respect as an adult, between two adults or between many adults. Once we're 18, we're all adults. That's it.
Let's go back to school a little bit, okay? What do you think what do you think you missed out? What do you think you wish you had back then, which would have made your journey easier? Or could anything make it easier?
I think any representation of gay relationships or homosexual relationships or other sexual minorities would have been interesting, simply because it would have helped me identify what I was going through with something else. Let's take a simple example. If people give roses today on Valentine's Day, it's because we've seen a million people do it all over again. Love does not only occur through roses, right? It's a way of showing your, and it's the same thing for me when I'm attracted to a male and a man, and I don't know if it is just sexual or if it is also emotional. I need to see people around me who are in all kinds of relationships, so that I know that the moment I feel emotionally and physically attracted to somebody, that it's right, that it's normal. So this would have pushed back my coming in a few years, I think, easily. So I think representation is very important, and thankfully today with the internet we have enough of it. I mean, people watch Modern Family, people watch. Everybody knows that Sheldon on Big Bang Theory is gay in real life. So
Right.
people being open helps, and this is, I think, also one of the reasons why I wanted to do this show with you, because I think it's important that we talk about this openly, so that people find a bit of themselves somewhere else, so that they feel legitimate.
Yeah, and also, there's the reason I wanted to do this with you was there's a factor of relatability.
Yeah.
I mean, usually when we look at a gay couple or somebody who's gay getting married, we only look at certain stars, or we look at somebody who's popular, somebody
Hmm.
who's in the media.
Absolutely.
And we are right here, very happy middle class Indian family. And yeah, we are happy being gay, we're happy being
Being
straight.
ourselves.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
doesn't really matter, right?
Yeah.
I'm almost disappointed. We're almost very close to our last few questions. So there is one thing that I always observe, Kaushik. I could be wrong because my interaction with the LGBTQ community is very limited, but I often
Hmm.
find that gay men, are more
Hmm.
open to talking about their sexuality in comparison to women. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
Or
I do, because once again, that's the only thing we see around us. I mean, we don't see enough couples to say that we have more than our sexuality. Like I said, my only reference to my orientation was porn.
Hmm,
If I had seen, but this is something that you will see. I think in the younger generations, from what I see from the queer community, the sexual baggage and the sexuality is less important because there's so much representation around them. It's not even a question. I mean, your first sexual experience is probably the same as any heterosexual person now, simply because you have so much more representation around you. You don't have to wait till you're sure and everything. And you don't have to wonder whether I'll be in a relationship or not, because you see it all around you. And I think this is also a reason why, and today we talk about, for example, women's pleasure. We talk about women's orgasms. We talk about safe sex. We talk about male contraception, but not necessarily just condoms, but even like pills and so on. So sexual discussions are more and more prevalent today, and I think it's, thankfully, it's too late, but it's not too late. Thankfully it's happening at some point rather than never. And I think that is what is going to change this whole part. In our generation, our only references to other men who were attracted to men was porn, so that's why sexuality is that big a baggage. But today
right.
no more, because our other references to men who are attracted to men are also couples, are also
Hmm,
relationships, famous people who are in relationships, people like me who talk about our relationships. And this is very important, and this is what will help everybody to talk more about openly about other things.
right. So given that, given our own references, like you said, was porn, or maybe, like you told me, you found some book in this bookstore.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Gangarams.
Gangarams. Yeah. So
But once again, it's still sexuality, right? It's still
correct,
sex. There's
correct,
no romanticism in it.
correct. So
There's no emotionality to it.
these are the references. So tell me, how did that affect your own first sexual encounter? Because for you, it must have been very different.
So let's put it this way: whether it be homosexual or heterosexual, porn is never representative of real sex, simply
Correct.
because it is
Please note.
exaggerated, simply because it is theaterized. People are unable, unfortunately, the way we consume it, we are not able to make a difference between what is a fantasy and what is real.
Correct.
You can read science fiction and not believe that this is going to be the future. You see what I mean? And the same way, you have to be able to look at porn and say, this is not what sex has to be like.
Hmm.
And unfortunately for me, there was too much of a baggage from all the years. And most of my first encounters were all disappointing, simply because I just didn't see the same thing that I saw on the screen. And it takes time for you to understand that you can appreciate things that are not shown on the screen. You can appreciate moments of intimacy which are not sexual at all,
Hmm.
and be happy. We don't see this. We
Right.
don't see this in films. We don't see this in porn. We don't see it anywhere.
So let's come to unfortunately, my last question for you today. Please tell us what support groups are available for youngsters who probably want to come out to their families or who are thinking about, who are still exploring the sexuality? What are the kind of support groups that are available in India, especially?
So I think there are a lot. I think this social media helps a lot. There's a lot of support groups like Good on You in Facebook is a big support group in Bangalore. Let me just quickly check because I think it's called Good on You, but I
It's
need
called
to
Good as You.
verify.
Good as You. That's
Good
good.
as You. Sorry, yeah, Good as You. Good as You is a very interesting Facebook page which has a lot of references to psychologists, psychiatrists who can deal with the question. People who have come out, people who are struggling with their coming out. I think there's a lot of nice references to find there. There is another site I remember called Orinam, which also has a support groups for people who don't speak English, because let's not forget that not everybody speaks English.
Correct,
We shouldn't be classist about this question. So there are support groups in Tamil, Malayalam, Kannada, Telugu, which have questions asked by parents, responded with replies from other psychologists, psychiatrists, and so on. And these are very important resources. And fortunately, we also have Google. You can simply search for online support groups, and you will find if anybody requires professional help, they can get in touch with me. Maybe Nupur, you can share my Instagram or my Facebook, and they can get in touch with me, and I can put them through to professional psychologists, psychiatrists who can help them to get through anything that they need to discuss and to bring out in the open. Because leaving questions unaddressed is probably one of the worst things that you can do in this field.
Absolutely. And additionally, guys, hoopsters.in, we have a huge network of mental health specialists, starting right from NIMHANS all the way to independent counseling and psychiatric clinics. So if you really need any help, you don't have to state your name. You can be completely anonymous. You can write to us at info@hoopsters.in, info@hoopsters.in, and we will do everything we can to put you on to the right people. And you have Kaushik. You can look Kaushik up on Instagram. You can look for him on Facebook as well. You can write to him, write to us. The idea is, let's create a support group that really doesn't make it so hard for people. Just respect each other, live happily. We're all here together. I mean, I hope there's someday where we don't need to have these talks, and people are able to accept things for the way they are. That's the hope.
The hope.
That's the hope. All right, Kaushik, I am so happy, and I'm thankful to everybody who attended. We had some of our classmates who came in. Amoga is here, Rashmi is here, I guess. So really, thank you guys. This shows that you guys are supporting us, and even after all these years. So thank you so much. Thank you so much, and thanks, Kaushik. Any parting words?
It's very difficult to summarize something like this, but basically, I mean, ask for help if you need, and you will find it, really, because don't remain in questions.
Right. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Ask anything. You can ask anything, and we will find the best resources for you. Thank you, guys. Have a wonderful afternoon, and you have a good day ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys. Bye-bye.